the form property, we have to assign it of the to the type form group form builder dot group, and we have to import the form builder, and we can do this in our constructor. I have to.
Ben, will you please spend just like 5 seconds going over what you were doing before you started recording? I know it's just like, 30 seconds or so, but for people who are going to go back through this, that would be really helpful, I think.
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
Okay, so what I'm doing is from our last session, we created a template form, and now I'm converting that template form to a reactive form. And to work with reactive form, first of all, we need to declare a variable of type form group. So I have declared a variable of time form group here. And now I'm initializing the variable with the form builder class and the group function. So our constructor, we should inject the form builder from our constructor. And I'll just copy from here. And I'll import the form builder. Okay. So now the group function, it expects an object, and we will have to pass it an object here. And the object will be our controls. So here, what I'm doing is I'm saying, okay, I have a property of first name, which will be of type form control. So while working with forms, we have two classes. One is form group and another one is form control. And we need form builder to create our form group. So first name is a property which will be of the type form control, and form control, we pass an empty value to set the initial value. So initial value of this form will be blank or empty. And then we declare validation using the validators method and the validators class and the required property. So here I am saying that I have first name, initializing the form control, initial value will be empty, and then the validation will be required. Then I have last name, same as well. Then for age, what I'm doing is initializing its initial value as empty, and then the validation is required. And then there are additional validation, which is of min type and maximum type. The same as we did with our template form. If in our template form, what we did was we did the validation using HTML5 properties. So here we had required, and then for age, you can see, okay, we don't have it here, but for age we can set max, say 1, and minimum as 100. So essentially it's the same thing. What I'm doing is, instead of now declaring required uh, fields, I'm doing it in my TypeScript class.
Did you mean to have that reversed with max being 100 and minimum being 1?
What?
You said that the max was 1 and the minimum was 100. I'm wondering if that was
Yeah,
reversed. Okay.
that was reversed. Okay. So let me check here whether I have this. No, this one is correct. Okay. So This is pretty much how we declare our forms from our TypeScript class. This is the initialization of our forms. So I have an exception which should not be here.
I have a quick question here.
Yep.
HTML5 allows placeholders, right? So is there any way to put placeholders using these form controls?
Mm, by placeholder means what the type of this HTML type will be, right? So
No,
yes, we can put
no.
placeholder here also.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, we can use
But
both
that
TypeScript and
no, but that
uh,
is driven, right? How about in reactive forms? That's my question. Hello, are
I
you
can
able?
still hear you. I can still hear you. So you're still being broadcast.
Uh, I'm sorry, guys. I just got disconnected for a moment. What was the question again?
So I know in template-driven forms you can do that because
Mhm.
HTML5 supports it. But how do you do that with reactive forms?
Reactive forms. Actually, placeholder I have always placed using this HTML. See, mm, we can use both as well. We are just taking some of the functionalities to the backend, means to
Oh,
the code base, so that we can control some of the functionalities more easily. For example, we can create custom validators here, so that will be an added advantage. But I've
okay,
always used for placeholder. I have used HTML5.
okay. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, that's pretty much how we declare our forms from reactive form, and I can now go ahead and remove the ng model, because we are no longer using forms module here. We are no longer using ng model here. We no longer need the template variables. So I can remove the template variable. So I don't need this form template variable. So instead of ng form, what we are using now is we are using form group, means this form. And instead of the template variable ng model template variables, we are directly using the form control type. So and I also don't need to pass any data to my on submit, and and I'll quickly replace my HTML, and I'll walk you through how our form has changed. So if you see, previously using template form, we used the form template variable of ng form type. Now we are using an attribute form group of the type form, and for our event submit event, we are calling on submit method just like before, but we don't have to pass the ng form type to our submit method. And then coming to our controls. So now instead of using name, we use the form control name, then nothing else. If you see from there, we are just saying our form control name is first name, which will correspond to our TypeScript class, that is this first name.
How is the connection being made between that particular form and this form in the XML? What is the method, the The connection. How are those two getting associated? Because
by this
obviously you're going to have. Okay, so
by
I'm
this
sorry.
form.
You said of type form. So form is actually the name of the form
But
in.
sorry if I said that I'm mistaken. Of type form group, and the variable name is form. In our case, we can name it, say,
Oh,
form
okay. The
add
name
and
of the form is form.
yep.
That's the unique name of the form that will associate it with this form that we've built right here in our TS file.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I understand now.
Okay, so now our HTML form is much cleaner. The validation more or less is pretty much similar. Like we are setting our ng class. We are setting our ng class depending on condition. Here we use the ng model type to get the touched, untouched, pristine state of our form. What we are doing now in reactive form is we are saying use this form's controls first name and then get the state, whether it's touched or it has errors. So the concept is more or less same. The only difference is now we are using uh, form group and form control instead of ng model and ng forms. So that's the main difference we have. And yep, that's how we are adding validations. Now, if we go to the code behind, and I'll just close. Now, if we go to our TypeScript class and say we want to load our form as soon as our ng on init is fired. Previously, we were going and assigning it in this manner. We went to our employee service, get employee by ID, subscribe to it, and then set the properties of this object. Now to work when we work with reactive form, we don't need to go ahead and declare a type here. Say we can straightly call a function and we can straightly call our functions. We'll say, okay, get access to this form's control first name and set the value. And we are getting our value from our HTTP call that's inside emp.body. And that's how we assigned our values to our form. And to submit our form, it's more or less similar to this, but all we need to do is yeah, instead of form from here, all I need to do is this dot form dot value, and I can put condition check here if this dot form dot valid. So if it's not valid, I can return here and set the exceptions like other exceptions also. If we have not disabled our button, we can disable our button using the same check there. So if form not valid, then the submit button won't be enabled. So now if I go ahead and try to submit my form, it should work. Something went wrong. It says compound form. Okay, this should have worked. Form group. The form isn't a non-property of.
Form's not like a reserved name or something like that, is it?
No, it isn't. So it was working. It's not like it. It's not working. I believe my code snippet while I copy pasted, I missed something. Let me check again if I missed something. Yeah, it may have added some empty tag. No, this should have worked. Okay, just give me 1 minute. Yes. This should have worked. No reason for that exception. Okay. Okay. I have my test work here itself. So while I was testing this code, it was working. So I don't see any reason why it should not work.
Typically, we've instantiated and then actually set the value of the variables. But I saw that form group form didn't actually get set to anything. Is that a problem? Maybe no, because
Mm,
you're setting constructor.
yeah, we are setting it here. So, so, hmm, did I miss something? I shouldn't, because it's very simple. It's not like I'm doing this first time. I keep doing it every day. So why it's giving me the error? Okay, let me just run again. It's- I have the form group of type form, and here I have declared the form of type form group, and I have defined it. The only thing that's missing here is this, which I think is not necessary in our case, but anyway. Okay, I'm restarting it. Let me check.
Maybe ID was referenced in another area, and it
But this is the first time we are declaring it, and I also don't need this. No. Okay. Okay. So on submit is
In component, it is showing line number 9, some error.
in component.
Yeah, line number 9, right? It showed. Yeah, the second error. I don't know if fixing that.
Oh,
What's
oh, okay. Yeah.
In the component, yeah, line number 9
But
is the right.
but it's
Is it
it's
okay? Right.
okay.
Okay.
It should not be an error. Interesting. Okay. I'll try to fix this and we'll show you the submit functionality tomorrow if it's okay. Because this was the last part in uh, the in showing how we post using reactive forms. But this should not cause the error. Okay, let me just let me just
Could
try
something
to.
lingering from the template form that didn't get commented out that should have gotten commented out that it could cause this?
Yes, I'm also suspecting that like something got, but it's not making sense to me why it's saying that uh, why it's saying it can't find. Okay, the error it's giving is it's saying that it can't find the type form in the form group. So what's he saying? Can't bind to form group isn't a property, is a known property of form.
And there's no compile time error.
Yeah, there's no compile time error.
TypeScript, do we have to declare that form group variable?
No, we don't need to declare the form group variable because we are injecting it from our constructor. So if you see, I have used this form builder here, and this one I don't need.
And private is
Uh,
for sure the right access modifier.
yes, private is the right
Right?
access modifier for all
Sorry, I'm
everything
just
we.
making random guesses.
Yeah, I can understand. So here you can see I have the same piece of code for my test run. I have form group. I have form group, and then I have the form builder group. Form builder dot group, and it's building. It's working fine. It's not giving me any exception. So let me just run this, and I'm not sure if this one will run. But let me just give it a try here. So if I go to add employee, and this one is, so this, okay, demos, they don't always go well, I guess.
I would almost say that demos never go the way you expect.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll come to this login form in a while. So this add employee, it's the same code that like the one there. And if you see, why don't I do one thing? Let me just copy everything from here. Giving it a last shot. And in add employee, just bringing everything from here to there. And if it works, add employee, yeah, I don't need. Now where it's giving me error. And number 53. Okay, it's giving me all sorts of error, which should not be the case. Get employee by ID. What's it saying? Okay. Okay,
The
anyway, I
first
don't
part
want to.
next,
Yeah,
right? When you
yeah.
subscribe, but it's not saying next.
Oh, yeah.
Next, next
Next, we don't
error.
have to explicitly declare next.
Not in
Uh,
that place where it
here,
was showing.
here,
Here.
right? You're saying
Yeah.
next. So,
Yeah.
if we remove next, what will happen is, RxJS, it knows that it's obvious to it that here next should be there. And
Okay.
if we remove, it will just pick the variable and start working with it as next. But
Okay.
yeah,
But
I
this
think
one should be empty function, right? For error.
which one?
The next argument should be empty function, right? The next one, yeah, for error.
For
Oh, okay.
error? No,
No, no, no.
this
The
the
last one.
complete should be empty.
Okay. Yeah.
The complete should be empty. I don't know, something's wrong with my code here, IDE, and this should have been working. But let me just see. So here I'll show you in this piece of code. You can see I have declared the form group here, and so I have initialized the form using the form builders, assigning values to the form group type, declaring my validations, my form control, the validators, age, bonus, and on initializing, I'm going to my employee service and getting the employees by ID, and using the set value function inside the forms control name, I'm assigning the values here. If there is a query string parameter, and then on submit, I'm going and calling the add employee function of our service. So here what I'll do, don't know if it will work. Test name, page 23, and this is running on port 4300. That means this is the code that's running, and it's building. We are not getting that error here. So it's is manager, bonus is 200, and you can see I successfully submitted the first name, last name, and the value. So this is how reactive forms are declared using the form control. The concepts are more or less same with template forms, template driven forms, and reactive forms. Just here we use the form group type to declare our form variable, initialize our form variable using form builder, and then assign the controls here. And by here we set the default value. Here it's empty. If I put here, say Salim here, build it, and then login. Okay, I know what the issue is. I just know what the issue is. I don't have to do anything. And the issue should be we are not importing the right module. So if you see here, we should be using reactive forms module. And here we are using the forms module for ng model and ng form, but to work with reactive forms, we have to import reactive forms module. Nice one. So let me just build, and if I don't get the other error, so it compiled successfully. And if I go to 4200 and set it as test, so that's what happens. As you can see, it's added now.
But why is it not helping us to understand that it's the module that missed and you're trying to use import from something that you haven't imported in the module?
So the thing is, it won't be able to understand using my HTML, right? In the HTML, but it should do Angular
No,
compiler.
in the component you're using form group and form control classes, right?
Yep,
So
right.
means you must be using the reactive forms module, but it didn't help us understand that that's what is missing.
Yeah, so that's what is missing. Then yeah, but again, this should be in a different library that Angular should put. If you see, both
Okay,
in template driven and reactive driven classes are inside the same library that Angular has put.
okay.
And this is why I believe we didn't get that error. If this was from a different, if they had separated this from forms to say reactive forms, then we might have seen that error, the exception.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, but um, I don't know. We can raise a ticket in the GitHub issues that this should be in different places.
Or at least give a better error message.
Yeah, at least. Yeah, that issue can be raised in their GitHub. And okay, so that's this is where I'll conclude reactive forms. It's very similar to template forms, but this give us some additional capabilities to work with. Like here we can have declaring regular expressions from here and custom validations. It also help. We can also import other modules where we have custom validations and all. That's easier. Working with events also make easier. We can now work with events and change the values depending on conditions. So we say we have a function where I want to change the value of each manager to say even if it's checked there, I want to change it to false or something. I can do it from code base here very easily. So yeah, okay. So now I'll move on to securing Angular applications. If you have any questions now, you can ask.
I'm just disappointed because I'm used to working with Java, and Java never has obscure, non-helpful error messages.
Yeah, and
Sorry,
so
sarcasm.
yeah, I understand. Like I'm also not. I've been working with .NET, and we have like pretty good error exception messages.
They're usually
And
pretty good, but every once in a while you hit one where you're like, wait, what?
yeah, but we have to give Angular a credit because like they are open source. Uh,
It's
so
JavaScript.
yeah, so like if we can contribute, then we can also contribute. Raise ticket, at least let's see what they say, and we can pick the code, and then we can also do the changes. Okay, so now coming to securing Angular applications. So so here I'll start with saying one thing. I'm not a security guy. So all that I have read, learned, and implemented, that's what uh, I'll share, because security is a huge topic and like it takes years and years and to actually understand it properly. And some of it will be opinionated, like will be my opinions. So, and if I don't have a clear idea and you guys know the stuff better, then please share with me. So first thing we need while securing our Angular application is to prevent the middle man in the middle attack. We should always use SSL certificates. So there are any transactions are all secured. Then we should always enable CORS, that is cross origin resource sharing, enabled on our backend. In Azure case, we have to explicitly go and enable our API using to allow, and also don't allow all origins. Specify the domain which will be accessing our endpoints. So from last time's discussion, there was something we discussed a bit about the browser storage, and we have three type of storage for our for storing data in our browser. The one is local storage, session storage, and in memory. And by default, or in HTML5 browser, what happens is that local storage and session storage, they are domain specific, means the data of one domain. So here, if I show you, so that's what they say if I go to application. So the data that we store in local storage technically should not be available by, say, another tab or another application that's running. And also the same is valid for session storage. And difference between local storage and session storage is as soon as we close the tab, the data in session storage gets cleared and we lose our data. And in memory is when we use TypeScript to store our values in our objects. That's how we can store data on our client side. Now coming to storing sensitive data on browser. So what I do is I never allow to store any data uh, in the browser. Uh, and some of us may think that storing encrypted data is okay, but there is an exception here. We can store encrypted data in our browser if the encryption and decryption is happening on our backend. If we do encryption and decryption in our Angular application, so we'll have to store our keys somewhere, the way we decrypt. So if I go to, say, if I have a decryption key stored in my uh, environment variable here, say, for example, I have a value of D key equal to, say, ABC. I'll show you one thing, that why I don't allow even encrypted. I suggest don't store encrypted data as well in your browser. Say we have used some third-party libraries, say crypto.js or something like that, and we are encrypting and decrypting. Then we are storing our encryption and decryption keys here. If you're storing it in our server side and all, that's okay. Because anytime we encrypt and decrypt our data using server side code, it's okay. We can store it because because no one can know our keys. But if we store our keys in our Angular application, what will happen is ng serve. So now I'll run my application in the production mode. And This prot command has been deprecated. Now we have to use this configuration production command, but this has become an habit. So I'm still not used to configuration production. So what I'm trying to say is, if I go to my browser, even in production mode, I can go to sources and inside main file. So this is not uglified now. This is not bundled, but I can do a simple search here and search for something like keys, or here you can see decryption key, and I can get your decryption key from here. And the second thing with storing data, specifically sensitive data on browser, is most of the time the compliance, they don't allow to store any data in our browsers. So like it's better to not store any data here. And
Hey, Salim, quick question
yeah,
here.
yeah,
What my understanding was, when it goes to the client, it goes only HTML. So will they have this main and uh,
And all JavaScript will also be delivered to the
yeah.
client.
okay,
So when you say only HTML, that is it's rendered on the server, and then your application's DOM goes to the client's browser. That's how we used to do in server side rendering. And in client side, we send everything, but in a very uglified bundle and minified way. And that's the reason we can achieve single page application like SPS and all using Angular.
got
There is a there is a concept of Angular universal Angular, which will render everything on the server side. So as ASP.NET developer, we have that built in whenever we create an Angular package, but the performance is very, it's very slow, and it doesn't give the UI and UX of a pure Angular application which runs on client side. Even my last project was to move everything from uh, Universal Angular to proper Angular 9.
okay,
Yeah. So here you will see now it's running on production mode, and all the code is now under main.js. And it's hard. You cannot just like say pretty print and like everything is in JavaScript now. No TypeScript code will run on the client browser. But say I want to search, uh, what was that D key? Let me just see. What did I put? Yeah, D key. So if I search D key now, it should be somewhere. Okay. But I don't know why it's not showing here. But all the code is available. So if you put some sensitive, say encryption, decryption key, private keys here, so the user can go ahead and search and find out. Okay, we have they are using this key. So that's why. Also, because of compliance and all, I don't like to storing data on the browsers.
okay.
And the
Yep.
exception is if you are decrypting encrypting on your server side and no one can decrypt it, then it's okay, it's fine. But again, if the compliant allows you guys. So now moving on, token based authentication. So there I'm aware of two that I have worked with. One is OAuth 2. There was the original version of OAuth, and OpenID Connect. So OpenID Connect is a standardized protocols which focus on collecting credentials and issuing token to client. and we have this OpenID Connect. Uh, you can see, you can learn more about OpenID Connect by visiting this openid.net. Okay, so the identity providers that implements OpenID Connects are Google, Facebook, Twitter. So they all provide authentication services using OpenID Connect protocol.
I've heard of those.
Okay, and this has become the standard, and like this is what most of the companies are using nowadays, OpenID Connect, to authenticate mobile applications and single page applications. And we have the obviously from Microsoft, and we have Azure Active Directory version 2 that supports OpenID Connect protocols. We have Azure Active Directory B2C services in Azure that also supports OpenID Connect. So since we are .NET guys, and our enterprise application most of the time has Active Directories, so we implement authentication using Active Directories, Azure Active Directories. And then when we need to authenticate our user using public services, we have this services like Auth0, Okta, and then for our .NET guys, we have an open source OpenID Connect certified project that is Identity Server 4. So using Identity Server 4, we can completely manage our uh, users' identities, authentication, and authorization. And to give you a basic idea how OpenID Connect architecture is, I downloaded the image, but uh, I yeah. So this will give us some idea if it opens. So what actually happens is, so even GitHub also implements the same OpenID Connect. So this is our single page application. In our case, it's an Angular application. We will have an identity server. So this can be OAuth server. This can be identity server for which we ourselves manage in our organization, or I believe Java will also certainly have some identity providers which will implement OpenID Connect. So here we will send our credentials, and all of our credentials and security are managed by the identity providers. This will go ahead and verify, create a session for us, and then return us a token. And then for subsequent authorization to our endpoints, we will send the token in the header, authorization header, and then our API server will validate and then give us the response, the data we want. And and we also have a scenario where our API backend itself is the token issuer. So you can remove this centralized identity server, and then the very API which will be handling authorization will issue the tokens itself. But you can think like we have in a microservice world where how we work, or the project that I build, I have not a single API server, I have multiple, like at least 2 to 3, and then managing like authorizing the token becomes hard when like if all three of them start issuing tokens. And then so that's why we move out our authentication services into a centralized we call it STS, So like identity provider, token issuer. So if you have any questions like in this part, you can ask.
So how does the resource server validates that token, access token?
Oh, it calls the identity server provider. So every time our request comes in our authorization header, uh, we have a code that we implement using our identity. Say for an identity server, we implement a piece of code. For every request, it goes and check whether this token is valid or not. And if it's not, it starts sending us back 401 or 403 exceptions. So working with identity servers in Angular, we have something plain as Angular JWT, using which we can implement token authentication ourselves. We can write the entire authentication services ourselves. For Active Directories, the version 1, we have ADAL library. That's a client and library built by Microsoft to work with older generation Azure Active Directories. Then we have something new, that is Microsoft Authentication Library, that supports OpenID Connect. And then we have from Identity Server, that is OIDC client. Now OIDC client is built by Identity Server guys. It's certified by OpenID Connect and is part of the .NET Foundation. So when we use this client libraries, most of our works is already done. Some of the securities are also handled by the library providers. So now for this for our session, what I am doing is I'm using Google Firebase. So Google Firebase gives us this identity server, because you can imagine if I spun up my own identity server using identity server and all, that will be very complex. So I'm using this Angular Firebase, which does provide me with an identity service. So if I go ahead. So here for authentication purposes, I am using a simple email password service here. There are other services like OTP base, which are verified using SMS OTPs. Now Google accounts, Facebook account, Twitter account, Microsoft account. So Firebase gives a very easy way to quickly spun off your identity server. So here you can see I have this demo user at Gmail, which I've created. And then what I'll do, and then to work with Firebase, we need to integrate some configurations, and it gives us a configuration file like this. So I have to include this properties in my Angular project, and I have to include the include the client library that Angular provides. To include the client library, all I need to do is go ahead and add this Angular Fire and Firebase. So this will install the packages for me to work with. And then in my app.component, sorry, in my app.module, I go ahead and include the Angular Fire module. And this will be similar if you are using identities, OIDC client, MSAL, third-party libraries, and initializing the app and passing the values that Google provided me. And then to show you how the tokens work, this is the URL that I need to hit. Just Google APIs, Identity Toolkit. Now I have to pass the API key they provided, and then I'm just passing my username and password and saying that return me a secure token. So when I hit send, so Google sent me something like this, and this is how tokens are returned. Now this may differ based on different identity providers, but two things which will be common is the ID token and the refresh token. ID token is a JWT token. ID token is a JWT token, and refresh token is a token which we use to generate new ID tokens if our original token has expired. So to show you more about JWT token, I'll simply copy the token here and then go to jwt.io website. I am going to the debugger option page here, and then I'll paste it here. So JWT tokens are encoded, but anyone can go ahead and decode the token. But the part which makes it secure is JWT token are signed. So if somebody change anything here, I'll come to this one by one. But if somebody goes and change anything here, the identity server will no longer treat it as a valid token. So no one can fudge with it. So since it's signed, any changes here will change this whole signature, and then it will be an invalid signature. And I don't know why it's saying invalid. So coming to the tokens content itself. So all JWT token will have a header, and then it will have a payload. So here it says to look at the payload first, it's sending me the issuer ID. So it's saying that okay, Google is the issuer for this particular project. Here I have created a project Angular. The audience is my project. Then it sends the authentication time in epoch, and then it gives me an user ID. If you look, if you look, where is my Google? Okay, yeah, okay. So if you look at this, this is my user ID is GUID basically. So this is what I'm getting back. And then this is IAT is issued at subject. Subject is here they are sending the same thing, but when we work with our own identity servers, we can change the subject as well. Issue at and expiring at. So one of the biggest advantage of JWT token is that there is always an expiration time. In this case, it's 1 hour. Then we have the email, and then we have some claims here.
But if somebody can grab that JWT token, can they use it? How does it prevent somebody else to use the JWT token?
Okay, yeah. So if our token is stolen, now the main question comes when we work with token is okay. Before talking about stealing, I'll just say one more thing. That is here in this case, you will see that we can add claims, and here Google is simply naming it as Gmail and the username, and we can also add what we say other claims, say roles, or say role is admin or role is user. We can add it here, and now to make it more secure, what I do is I never say it email, or I'll never say it as role. I'll declare my own claims a bit differently, so that if someone is decoding the jot token, they will not be able to know what it actually means. And the claims also role, I'll never say role and straightly put admin. I'll slightly, even if I can, I will decrypt both of them and then use the claims as and decode them in a middleware in my .NET application. And then coming to the main issue with tokens is persisting tokens. So where do we keep our tokens? So either we can keep it in local storage. If we keep it in local storage, our application can be opened in multiple tabs. If we keep it in session storage, our application will lose the token as soon as we close our tab. And then if we use it in memory, as soon as we refresh, our token will be lost. If the page is refreshed, our token will be lost. And then coming, what can someone do if they stole our token? So generally tokens are considered more secure than username and password, because if username and password are stolen, like they can use it for a longer time. But since here, say we have said that our token will expire in 15 minutes. So after 15 minutes, anybody who has the token is useless to him. They can't do anything with it. Second of all, they cannot change any data here. Like they cannot say, okay, make it from 15 minutes to 3 days. As soon as they change anything, this token becomes invalid, the signature fails. And then uh, if if they if we have course policy implemented, they cannot use it in another application, but they may stole it and use tools like Postman to hit our APIs. So what I do is whenever I issue a token, to just add extra security, I'll assign an IP address in a decrypt form and then check if the issued IP address of the token and from where the token has been called is the same IP address. So that's just my way of adding an extra security here. That's how we can prevent any misuse of token by adding an IP address as well.
Okay, if you have one server and multiple clients, do you generate JWT token for each client separately,
Yes,
or
yes.
okay?
Each
Where,
client is we add
where do you
separate.
generate the JWT token?
Where do
On the
we
server?
generate it?
Yeah.
In identity services? I showed
Okay.
you right now. So we
Okay.
uh, so here this identity server's main responsibility is to issue tokens and validate whether they are uh, valid or not. So what I believe is we don't
Yeah, what I meant
do.
was from identity server, how does the single page application, which part of single page application would retrieve the JWT token and continue to use? Is it the server side or the REST side or the client side?
So say our application has this login page. Okay.
Okay. Mhm.
So our application has this login page. On this login button, if I'm using a library which they provided, I'll just call the functions of that library. But we will create something known as an service class, auth service. It's a simple service class with the injectable type. And here, since I'm using Firebase, I'm using their function to go ahead and say them, okay, authenticate this email and password. So Google will authenticate and send me a token here. So if you see when I go ahead and authenticate my user, I'll just show you what Google sends. I I have logged what Google sent me, or I did not. I did not. So just give me one moment. So in this case, Google will send a bunch of data, but okay, I believe I showed you. So this is what the authentication server from Google is sending me. It's sending me the email, the ID token. But in your case, when you create, or in my case, when I create, I don't send the email as it is like this. I always send it inside the token here. And then I retrieve my claims and any data that I want from inside the token.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And anyway, if I go ahead and so this is how Google is sending the data. It's sending a lot of data. This is the token, and they are not saying that it's a token. They're just putting a and giving us the data back. So when you are issuing your own tokens or you are customizing the token, like I also don't simply say ID token, just say something else and then pass the token. And then since our token expires very frequently, I don't implement this refresh token. I let the user to re-enter their credentials again. Uh, because what refresh token implementation does is that they don't allow the user to log out. Means they never let the user to log out. If the time of the token has expired, and we use refresh token and hit the refresh token endpoint, we will get a new ID token, and then our ID token will be replaced. Okay, so I think there was something else I wanted to mention. Yeah, okay, and then now coming to where do we store our ID tokens? So that's the part, and for some reason, okay, so if we look at Auth0, they suggest, like, their recommendation is to never store the token on local storage or session storage, because when we use Auth0 and their client library, they have something uh, which help us to use in-memory token storage, and they use something known as the web workers, which I have never used, and like transmission of storage. And what web workers basically do is that it stores our tokens in memory uh, in a separate global scope than the rest of the application. So where we store our token storage, because it's, again, it's depending on security, how we handle secure, like how we perceive which will be more secure. uh, Normally I have stored token in session storage, because when I use OIDC client libraries, they implicitly store the tokens in session storage. And then here in this case of Auth0 clients, it will store it in memory. So is there any question with token storage? Okay, so now Now let's see how we can like implement the security part in the application that we were building. First, I'll create a login component, and to create login component, I'll use the Angular CLI command, that is ng g for generate c for component, and I'll use a folder by auth, and inside that I'll create the login component. And by the time it creates the login component, I'll need one more component by the name of unauthorized, because if the user is not authorized, I want them to redirect to this unauthorized page. I'll place it inside the same folder, same ng g for generate c for component. So here you can see I have two folders inside auth, login, and unauthorized. So for login, I'll create a simple reactive form. And so I'm using form group. Here I'm, instead of naming it as form, I'm naming it as login form. I have the event ng submit, and on login will handle ng submit event. I have a label email. I have a type input, which has the form control name email, and set some bootstrap classes. And for exception, I'm updating the ng class, and for displaying the exceptions, I'm using ng if and saying if the required validation is fired, show that email is required. And if a regular expression pattern has caused the error, then go ahead and show email is not valid. And same with password. So now if I go to my TypeScript component class, I'll have to implement it. And I'll just copy and paste the login.component TypeScript from today's first code snippet. I should run my application. Okay. So here you can see I have declared the login form variable with the form group type. And then in the constructor, I have set the login form type as using form builders group function. And then for email, using form control empty initial value, and then validation required. And here you can see how we use the regular expression as validation. Here we can pass validators.pattern to declare the regular expression validations. Now I'll have to do one more thing very quickly. That is, I'll have to include the Angular Firebase libraries. So I'll quickly copy them from here, and I'll copy them from. I'll just add these two libraries in my package.json. And if you remember, if we add directly our update directly our package.json file, what we can do is we can just simply say npm install, and these two libraries will be downloaded and added to our node module folder here. Okay, so now since Angular Firebase has been added, what I can do is inside the app module, I'll register Angular Firebase code, and I'll just simply copy and paste it here. I'll import Angular Fire module. Angular Fire module is added in Angular/Fire library, so I'll have to import it. It's not. It should have installed the packages. Okay, I don't know what's happening with this project here. It's giving me exceptions. Okay. Yeah, so I included the Angular Fire module and passed the values that Google sent me, and then in my login page, what I did was I where was I? Yep. Okay. Okay. So I created this login component, and I created this unauthorized component. So here it says you are unauthorized. Please try to log in. We'll use it when we want our users to be redirected to this page, and when they are not authorized. In login page, it's a simple login with username and password. And then when our users click on login, what we will do is we'll go ahead and use a service that we will create, that is the auth service, and then we'll pass the email and password. And then if the user is authenticated properly, it will redirect us to the employee component. And then coming next, we have added the Firebase. Next, in this demo, what I'm doing is I'm using Angular services to store our state. So what we will do is we'll go ahead and add a class. So this is our class, Angular class auth service. It's injectable type, and it's provided in root, so we don't need to explicitly go and register. And here what we'll do, I have a login method. And you can see that this login returns async type, because here this login method is not working with observables RxJS, it's working with promises. And the reason it's working with promises is because Firebase, the functions they gave us, does not implement RxJS. The latest version of Firebase does give RxJS functionality. So what I'm doing is I'm calling this Firebase auth functions, and inside it Firebase gave us this method sign in with email and password. I'm passing the email and password from our form, and then the response that we get from Firebase endpoint, we are saying in our user get the token ID. This is function provided by Firebase. And if we have the token ID, I'm saying that call my state service and set the token with this value. And then I'll not use local storage here. And I'll say that go ahead and call the state service, set the login state. So we need to know whether if our user is currently logged in or logged out. So what I'll do is I'll say set the login state as true, passing this variable, or I could have directly set true here. And then whenever we say log out, what we'll do is we'll set the login status as false and we'll clear our token. Our token will be empty. And this is using Firebase. This is the class auth service, which we have implemented using Firebase. But if you have if you use your custom endpoint as a custom token services, what you may need to do is you will get the username, password, assign it to a object, call that endpoint URL in say for example your domain slash issue token or authenticate, something like that. Do a simple HTTP post, and then in the response body you will get the token back, and then you can set the token in the same manner here. I'm not calling this function because I'm using Google Firebase here. So I have this authenticate function already built. Like this is the function here. And then to look into the state service class. So if I go ahead and same way I have, it's a simple TypeScript class, injectable type. That means it's a service. Named it a state service. Have a private token of empty type. Private variable logged in status initialized as false. Then the set token, what it will do is it will get the token as a parameter and then set the value of this property, private token. Set login status, get the value of true or false, and assigned it to the local variable of login status. If it's true, that means our user is logged in. If it's false, that means our user is not logged in. And we may need to know from time to time that whether our user is logged in or not. So we can call this get logged in state from our state service and then find out if the user is logged in or not. So I have covered this auth service and state service. So I'll just run this application and show you again. So this is the form that we built, and here if I pass demo user @gmail.com and my password, and when I click login in my on login function of the login, we are calling the auth service login function. And if everything is okay, then we will use the route navigate and we'll navigate to the employee component. And if there is an error, I'm just alerting and saying throw the exception as an alert here. So I should be successfully logged in by Google, and now I am in the employee page. So do you have any question so far? Like any questions? Okay, so guys, are you able to hear me?
Yes. I
I have
actually,
this,
I have very little experience with authentication. So for me,
Yeah.
I'm going to walk through really slow and review everything in order to even formulate any questions if I for sure have any.
So
Yeah.
I have a question, like the whole authentication process, where you're looking, showing it as it's happening on the client side, right? Completely happening on the client side. But how does the REST endpoints are protected if you directly, somebody grabs the the REST URL and uses Postman or something to reach out to that post thing,
Yes.
the REST.
Yeah. So I'll quickly come to that. So till now, what we are doing is we are getting the token and then storing it in memory using the state service. So this dot token is where our token is now saved. Now next, what we'll have to do is, in my case, here I have this uh, ASP.NET service running, and this is hooked up with the Google Identity Service. So if I go to startup here, you'll see this piece of code, Firebase project name, token validation parameter. So this piece of code, add authentication.
Okay.
This piece will now for every request go to Firebase and then authenticate my request. If my token is invalid, it will return 401 or 403 exception. So all I
So the
need to
client,
do,
so the
yeah,
client is always sending the token back to the server.
for every request, the client needs to send the token in the authorized header.
Okay. Okay.
So no calls can be authorized without the bearer token. So I'll show you when if my PC lets me to. Okay, so now in order to send the or to add header, last time you may remember from our employee services, we use this headers and HTTP headers, and we add the content type as application JSON. So now there is a better way to add headers using interceptors, and I've shown you last time using interceptor. I have added the content type here. So in the same interceptor, what I am doing now is I am getting the value of the token from my state service. Here you can see I have the token variable, local token variable assigned, this dot state service dot get token. And then I am saying that go ahead and set the header of authorization. We have to add this bearer tag and then add the token. And for global error handling in the same interface, in the same interceptor, for every request, I'm saying that I'll have to pipe in, and to work with the error property here, I have to pass that an empty type. If we have an error, go ahead and check if the error is of type status 401, which is error of unauthorized, or 403 exception type. And here you can go ahead and add more exception status type for example, say 500, you can send it to different component. I'm saying that go ahead and set the token as empty. That means there will be no token in our in memory, and then go ahead and set the login status as false. So what will happen is I know we are out of time, but I'll just take 10 more minutes if it's okay with you guys to finish this. So here you can see I have used in .NET this authorized attribute, and in .NET all of these are like provided by Microsoft identity providers. So for claim base also I can use this authorized claims, and then what will happen is so what's gonna happen is you can see if I, oh, sorry, not this. I'll have to log in. Yeah, I will, without login, that means I don't have the token now. I don't have any token now. And if I go to the add employee page, I go to employees. Here you can see if I go to my network tab and check the endpoint that I created, I got the 401 exception. And because of the 401 exception, what happened was Angular sent me to the unauthorized page, the unauthorized component. And this is how we have handled global error exceptions, and we have set the authorized and bearer token. And to show you that the bearer token is now added, what I will do is I will quickly log in. I'll quickly log in. I'll say demo user @gmail.com. So if I go to network and you will see this employee, this is the get employee API call. And here in the request header, you will see this authorization and bearer tag has been added. The token has been added now, and using this token, the ASP.NET service and Firebase authentication server is able to authorize each of our endpoints. And then coming finally to restrict our users from accessing this our components, we need to use something called as authguard. Now authguard is part of routing. Again, simple service class. Here I've created a class by the name of authguard and then implemented the interface can activate. And in the constructor, I have called the state service and the router. And this can activate function that the interface implements does one thing. It checks if our condition is true or false. If our condition is true and we are returning true, it will let the user to visit that component page or that route. And if it's not, then we can navigate it to some other page. So for example, here what's happening is I am checking if the state service and user is logged in. If it's logged in, then return true. Yes, the user can go to that page. Now here you can add more conditions based on the claims. Say if it's admin, then only let the user to visit this page. And if not, then redirect the user to the login page. And to use authguard, all we need to do is go to our app root and then all the routes that we want to guard. Say here, I don't want the user to visit employee, add employee, or add employee passing ID. I will use the can activate authguard. And so now what will happen is if the user is not logged in, so if the user is not logged in, and if the user visits employee page, yeah, if he visits employee page, he will be redirected to the login form. As you can see, I can no longer go to employee or add employee components here. So I've created the login component, added Firebase, persisted the token, created an auth service, send the token using header, handle exception using interceptor, and we have guard our routes from unauthorized access. And to quickly enhance security like role claims, we must implement our endpoints with, we must guard our API endpoints with claims, authorized claims. Like we should not allow all calls to be made without checking whether the specific user is allowed to make that endpoint call. We can use API keys for each users to check if the user is valid, has access the same way Google gives API keys. We can use IP address blacklisting and throttling endpoint, so that if we see that our endpoint has been called like 10 times in 1 second or less than 1 second, or within 1 minute 20 times, we should start blocking that user. So that's it, guys. I was over time today.
Thank you, Salim.
So yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm gonna go ahead and take off because I do have another meeting at
Thank you.
9:45. So I'm out of here, but thanks a lot.
See you tomorrow.
See ya.
Yeah. See you
Thank
tomorrow.
you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.